Well, hello and welcome everyone to our virtual open house. Tonight we're going to be speaking about the Master's in Professional Studies focused on cyber policy and risk analysis offered online here at Utica College. Thank you so much for being able to join us for this exciting presentation. We've got an excellent lineup here for you, so let's go ahead and jump right into the agenda. So many of you out there that are going to be looking at this presentation are looking seriously at our MPS and cyber policy and determining if it's the right program for you, whether that be you're looking to make a career switch into dealing more at policy as a manager, maybe you're looking at a career change, you've done some things that you see would align with this. We're going to hopefully clarify a lot for you of what's going on in the industry, where the opportunities lie, what type of things you're going to learn in our program, and at the end, hopefully, you'll feel very confident if this is the right match or not for you. So first of all, I'm going to introduce our faculty speaker. We'll get into the landscape of cybersecurity and cyber policy. We'll look at what's changing in this landscape and different case studies that we'll take a look at to give you some examples of what is affecting policy in cybersecurity. We'll look at some of our affiliations that really separate us and set us apart from other schools. We'll look at the program overview and really dive into the content, what you're going to learn, the type of courses, what makes our program unique. And then we'll dive briefly into online learning with Utica College. Many of you, this may be the first time you're looking at doing a degree online, and that can be a little bit scary for many. So hopefully we'll be able to give you a little bit of clarity to what to expect with the online learning environment, and then we'll take some questions that have been already submitted for our speaker at the end. All right, well, let's go ahead and introduce our guest speaker, Austin Givens. Austin currently teaches undergraduate courses on Homeland Security, counterterrorism, and emergency management here at Utica College. Also teaches the graduate courses on critical infrastructure protection, cyber incident management, and network security. Has a great background, formerly a fellow at Foundation of Defense and Democracies, and later worked with the Department of Defense, Department of Homeland Security, Virginia Fusion Center, and on Capitol Hill for 2 members of Congress. And just recently successfully defended his PhD in public policy at King's College London. Congratulations, Austin, to that. That's quite an accomplishment. And co-author also, you're welcome, you're welcome. Also co-author of The Business of Counterterrorism, Public-Private Partnerships in Homeland Security, a fascinating read and insight into the business of counterterrorism, what's happening today. Welcome, Austin. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Jesse. It's good to be here.
Excellent. Well, let's dive into our first topic. Austin, I know you've really got a good understanding of what is happening in this area. We wanted to talk about the landscape briefly, just to kind of set a foundation for the content we're going to get into, and really focusing on it from a policy standpoint. So if you might maybe want to touch on this slide, we'll go into some of the different things that are happening in the field.
So the simplest way that I could describe the current cybersecurity landscape is as follows. There is a wide variety of emerging threats on the horizon, and the problem to employees who are trained to deal with these threats. So when you think about the cybersecurity workforce, we're really talking about 2 tiers of professionals. There are more technically oriented folks who do things like programming and network engineering, and then there are the managers, the ones who set strategic direction, the ones who manage budgets, the ones who manage hiring and recruitment efforts, and really both types of professionals are essential to deal with these emerging cybersecurity threats. And of course, as you probably know just from reading the news, cybersecurity, cybercrime is big business for bad guys. We're talking about well into the billions of dollars per year are stolen globally by cyber criminals. But beyond that, we also face an array of threats from nation states like China, Russia, Iran, for example, as well as non-state actors like ISIS in the Middle East, which has proven to be very savvy and formidable in its computing skills. So the threat landscape is vast, and there's a real shortage in talent to deal with these threats. And programs such as our MPS in cyber policy and risk analysis aspire to help fill that skills gap in a very concrete way.
Absolutely. Well, let's take a look here. Actually, I'm going to go to another slide first. So let's look at the changing landscape and kind of the old and new paradigm. I think this is a really interesting way to look at what's changing today.
Sure. So in the quote-unquote old paradigm of cybersecurity threats, we're talking mostly about richer governments that had very sophisticated computing capabilities, that had people who are highly trained in computer science and engineering and so on. And they were motivated primarily by the traditional sort of statecraft motivations you'd expect to see in any country. So espionage, gaining strategic advantage through stolen information, stealing money, cyber vandalism, just sort of malicious acting against websites, for instance. And generally, the methods of these attacks vary, but the targets tended to be other rich countries and or larger companies. But that whole paradigm is now shifting, and what we see today increasingly is that really any government, not necessarily rich ones, can use cyber capabilities to achieve their global foreign policy objectives, to achieve economic objectives. And beyond that, too, we see that non-state actors, groups like Anonymous or, again, ISIS, are able to really flex their online muscle. And they could do this for a variety of reasons. Espionage certainly, again, is one of them, but it could just be influence on the global stage. It could be to achieve particular economic growth targets. It could be to bring about certain social or political changes. And so the landscape really has opened up, especially during the last 10 years. And because the landscape has opened up, that has perpetuated the rise of so many increasingly strong states that are doing things in the cyber space, and I'm using that term very broadly, as well as non-state actors and other smaller groups. So it really is an evolving threat environment that we face today, and again, that's really driving the demand now for skilled and highly trained professionals in the cybersecurity profession.
Excellent, Austin. I think it's also helpful to look at some examples that many of us are familiar with, that you hear about in the news, that are pretty recent here. So we've got 3 different cases. Let's go ahead and get to that. So the first one, I think we're all very familiar with this. It's currently still going on, but the Apple versus FBI case in the San Bernardino terrorist attack. If you want to talk about how this relates to challenges in cyber policy, what's changing, what is changing in this area?
This is an interesting case because it involves a blending of traditional crime and what we might think of as cyber crime / cyber espionage. So the gentleman depicted at top right is Syed Farouk, who's now deceased. He was one of 2 shooters in San Bernardino who tragically killed a number of employees at a county government facility. And they ostensibly were inspired by ISIS and other kind of independent jihadist groups to carry out this attack. Where this starts to drift into a discussion of cybersecurity is the fact that Farouk, the guy again at top right, was carrying a county-issued iPhone. And again, we're talking about San Bernardino, California here. And that iPhone was locked. And there's a security feature on iPhones that can be set that automatically erases all the data on the phone after 10 failed. And that particular functionality is currently enabled on the phone now. And the FBI has been trying unsuccessfully to get into it. So at first there was a sort of collaboration going on between Apple, which of course manufactures the iPhone, and the FBI. But then things started to turn, and the FBI sought a judicial order signed by a judge, essentially compelling Apple to cooperate with the FBI. And the way Apple would get into this phone, theoretically, would be by producing a brand new operating system, which it would then install on this iPhone that would
Austin?
whole case.
We lost.
Yes, I'm here.
We lost you for a second. Could you repeat? Cut out for a second.
Sure. So the case really brings up a lot of really interesting questions around the constitutionality of the FBI requesting that Apple do this. And there are also really important ethical questions that we have to consider as well. Like, just because this is legal, does that make it right? And what sort of precedents might it set for future investigations involving computer hardware? And so one of the key management challenges that I see coming out of this particular case is this question: how do we balance convenience with security? Because that's one of the key persistent trade-offs that we see with new technologies today.
Oh yeah, absolutely, right. I mean, you look at how many companies have their own network with many employees that have a company-issued phone that's always connected to that network, transferring data constantly, right? I mean, that's a convenience for the company, but yet it's also a security risk a lot of times, right?
That's true. And another example, just from ordinary daily life, social media is so popular. I personally use a Twitter account frequently for professional reasons. And so we all kind of put ourselves out there in the online space. And that helps us to be connected. That helps us to stay in constant communication with people around the globe. None of that is new information. But what a lot of times we fail to consider is that there's a security trade-off in engaging in that kind of online activity. That by opening ourselves up to communication and connectivity, we also introduce brand new vulnerabilities in our own computing systems as well as our personal lives that weren't there before.
Absolutely. And the next case we have on the screen it was one I think everybody is familiar with, the Edward Snowden case. There's a lot of elements here of the way that we're managing and working with policy that has to be changed because of what he's done. I want to talk about this a little bit.
Certainly. So to remind our attendees, Edward Snowden was a contractor for a defense company called Booz Allen Hamilton. And he was working out of a national security agency, NSA office in Hawaii. And during the course of his career became increasingly troubled by a lot of intelligence activities that he observed happening with the NSA. And so he stole a massive amount of classified information from the NSA and leaked it to major newspapers, The Guardian and the UK and the Washington Post, of course, in the United States. And so numerous NSA intelligence collection programs came to light as a result of these leaks. And there's a vigorous debate that continues today around whether or not Snowden should be hailed as a hero or tried for what are objectively criminal actions, the disclosure of classified information without authorization or permission. So there are a few takeaways from the Snowden case. One is that insider threats, quote unquote, can come from anywhere. And it's important for cybersecurity professionals in general to have a sense of who's interacting with their computer networks, whether those are actual employees of the organization or outside contractors. And there are also ethical and moral considerations that come up that are really relevant to our MPS program, where we ask questions like, okay, is it permissible, is it right to ask someone, an employee, about their political leanings if that will help to screen out internal security risks? So that's a really delicate kind of question, but it's the sort of thing that lawyers and other policy professionals are dealing with every day in the federal government now.
Fascinating. Well, the next one we have is really interesting too, and this is really looking at the financial sector. But J.P. Morgan Chase, they had some big-time challenges with a major data breach. And how does this, fall into the same category?
Right. So the first two cases we looked at, the Saeed Farouk case as well as the Edward Snowden case, deal with government agencies. But of course, the private sector isn't immune to these threats either. And so J.P. Morgan Chase, which we all know is a very respected and enormous international bank, suffered a huge data breach last year in which data on about 83 million customers was stolen. And so in the midst of this breach, and J.P. Morgan dealing with it. They decided to massively increase their cybersecurity budget. Now, during the investigation where JP Morgan Chase tried to assess what had happened and precisely how it had happened, they determined that essentially a single computer server hadn't been updated and monitored properly. And that introduced the vulnerability into the network that permitted these outside hackers, it turns out they were based in Israel, to get into the network and to steal all of this data. So again, there's some key takeaways here. You know, small gaps matter, and it doesn't necessarily turn upon the size of your cybersecurity budget. It's more about how effective you are, how comprehensive you are. And it also, I think, underlines that really everybody is a target, whether we're talking about a government agency or a business or an individual. So the management challenge from this particular case is, you know, how do you construct a culture of awareness as a leader, as a manager, and permeate that culture down and out throughout your organization?
Fascinating. Really is interesting to see what's changing. Well, let's kind of wrap up, you know, what we've kind of been speaking about and looking at the summary of what's the new normal for the future.
We're in an interesting time because the legal and moral and ethical
Austin, we lost you again.
How about now? Can you hear me now?
I can hear you. Yeah, go ahead.
The issue we're dealing with, among others now, is that the legal, moral, and ethical landscape that we're dealing with in cybersecurity doesn't quite sync with the extent and severity of the threats in cybersecurity that we face. So we're gradually moving away from cyber tactics and just dealing with issues as they come up to thinking more strategically about how we better protect ourselves over the long run, how we secure computer networks better over the long run, and the kind of philosophies and laws and policies that underpin all of that. And of course, these changes are taking place against a backdrop in which there are many lawsuits, some of them quite serious and high in terms of their demand for cash payment, against companies for being fast and loose with data. So there is increased pressure on firms and government agencies alike to really tighten up their cybersecurity policies. And that presents a challenging environment for those of us who work in the field.
Absolutely. And it's fascinating. You know, let's take a look at, as we, you know, kind of look at careers, some of the different types of positions. I think the question a lot of times for our prospective students is like, well, how do I go look around for these type of opportunities? Can I look within my current organization? What are some of those job titles look like? And we just have a couple listed here. I know there's a lot more, but maybe if you want to talk about some of the different types of roles that are going to marry the need to understand enough about cybersecurity to be dangerous, right? But also, you know, being able to either be in a management role, being a policymaker, or in the legal side of things. You know, talk a little bit, if you could, about some of these opportunities.
That's exactly right, Jesse. So within organizations, as I mentioned at the outset of our discussion, there really are two tiers or two classes, if you will, of employees who work in cybersecurity, and they're both extremely valuable. They both play essential roles. There are more technically oriented folks who tend to be more engineers, more programmers, and there is another group which manages all of that activity, that sets strategic direction for organizations and how they think about IT and how they think about cybersecurity in general. So within government agencies and many businesses, you will see job titles such as privacy officer, someone who is charged with ensuring that data are protected in a certain way, but also that employees in an organization as customers have their data safeguarded in ways that are both legal and ethical. Another example of this from the healthcare field is a HIPAA surveillance monitor. Of course, if you talk to anybody virtually who works in healthcare today, you get a little bit of eye rolling when HIPAA comes up as a topic of discussion. But HIPAA is an important law. It's an important law that does a a job that is essential, which is protecting patient data from unauthorized sharing and disclosure. And so within large hospitals, within large health systems, even within health insurance companies, you will see a role like this, HIPAA surveillance monitor. Just to take another example from the intelligence world, there's so much data that's being sucked up electronically by the U.S. intelligence community and other defense-related agencies, not only in the U.S. but abroad. And so how do you sift through that data? How do you make sense of that data in a way that is useful for decision makers and policy makers? Well, a data mining specialist or someone in data mining would play precisely that role. They do the sifting, they do the analysis, but they'd also think strategically about how to make that sort of data useful for the people who need it. So my advice to anybody who is interested in this type of career path in which you, as Jesse said earlier, you know enough to be dangerous in cybersecurity, but you're really more interested in managing people and processes and the strategic direction of an organization. Look around for job titles that include words like manager, organizational direction, strategic direction, budgetary, finance, analyst, these types of things that also marry up words that fall under the rubric of cybersecurity, like surveillance, like privacy, like data mining. And that's really where you find the sweet spot, and that's where you find opportunities for graduates from this program. They are, again, interested in cybersecurity. They are technically fluent enough in different areas of cybersecurity to really be formidable on their own merits, but they feel a calling toward managing and directing this activity within organizations.
Very well said, Austin. And it seems to be evolving. Like, you know, a lot of these positions that we see today are going to continue to evolve in the next 1 to 2 years. I mean, I think our graduates are going to see a brand new landscape by the time they even graduate. Are you kind of seeing the same thing?
I agree. As we've said kind of repeatedly throughout the discussion today, the threat environment itself is always changing. But if there is one constant, it's that the number and severity of threats is growing. So we're going to see increased demand for these positions. That's a certainty. And the only real question is, are we as a society going to produce enough people who are trained and confident to walk out into the workforce and seize these roles? That's really the question that arises from this growth in the threat landscape.
Well, now, coming from a student's perspective, my next question would probably be, if I'm listening to this presentation, okay, so I see there's definitely opportunity, Austin. What are some of the things that I should be looking for in the school that I'm selecting? And I think one of them is the accreditation, right? You know, what kind of accreditations am I looking for? What type of stance of approval am I looking for? And Utica has it with flying colors, right? We look at all of the different affiliations. If you want to address just briefly what some of these represent, what it means to the college.
Definitely. So yeah, any prospective student who's shopping around for a program, I would strongly recommend to them that they look carefully at the kinds of institutional relationships that a place has and what those institutional relationships say or suggest about the quality of the academic program. And yes, at Utica College we have an array of excellent relationships with very well-respected organizations. So within the federal government, for example, we have a relationship with the National Security Agency and the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. Specifically, we are recognized as a center of academic excellence in what is called information assurance and cyber defense education. And that's really a gold seal of quality that is recognized by the NSA and DHS for education in precisely this field. It goes so far as to say that the NSA and the DHS both have recognized that the classes we offer and the types of topics that we address in our classes are very closely aligned with their organizational missions. So anybody coming out of our programs, and the MPS in particular, is going to graduate with an education that flows naturally into employment for agencies like the NSA and DHS. We're also recognized for our work in digital forensics. Digital forensics, in brief, refers to the process by which law enforcement agencies, among others, develop a body of digital evidence that they then present at trial in order to effect prosecutions. So we have an excellent relationship with the Defense Cybercrime Center, or DC3, which is a branch of the U.S. Department of Defense for education in that area. We also have on our campus the Northeast Cyber Forensics Center, and this particular center is well recognized nationally for the work that it does in cybercrime investigations. In fact, almost all of the mobile devices that are seized by U.S. Customs and Border Protection along the U.S.-Canada border come to us for analysis. So that's something that we certainly consider to be a great honor, and that we're quite proud of. And more recently, we've also done with industry. The EC Council you may have heard of because they issue, among other things, the Certified Ethical Hacker certification, or CEH. They also issue a number of other certifications in diverse areas of cybersecurity. And in fact, I teach a particular course that maps to their disaster recovery professional certification. And CompTIA is similar. They have a number of professional certifications that are very respected that they issue, and they recognize the value of our curriculum, of our courses, and the topics that we address. So again, in summary, we have an excellent array of professional relationships, not only in government but also in industry, and we're quite proud of those relationships. But I also just point students to the fact, again, that when you look at relationships, you should ask yourself, what do these formal ties say about an institution? What did they say about the quality of the product and the education that they're going to potentially offer you? That's a really important question to think about as you search for a school and try to explore a new program like this.
Absolutely. Thank you for a great explanation, Austin. Well, the next question, what am I going to learn? What are we learning in this program? Let's talk about that.
Great. So as you get into the MPS program, there are some core courses that everybody goes through, and those core courses are designed to give you a really clear, firm foundation in cyber policy and risk analysis, and then you enter into specializations. So I'll talk first about the core courses, and then maybe we can get into what's involved with the specializations. So among other courses, you'll deal with cyberspace and cybersecurity, a basic intro course that teaches you in greater depth than what we've covered today, what the threat landscape looks like, who the key participants are in that landscape. You'll also learn about international relations, how different nations work with one another or against one another to achieve their national goals in cyberspace, whether those are information superiority, gathering intelligence in other words, or economic development. We'll talk about how organizations manage risk. Risk management, I'll say parenthetically, is one of the biggest disciplines that we like to instill in our students because it gives students a systematic, rigorous tool for developing all kinds of incident management plans and strategic plans within their organization. So taking that class and the material from that class, students will really be able to take that knowledge and hit the ground running within their existing organization, or if they're looking to make a career switch into cybersecurity, specifically with a future employer. We also examine ethics and conflict. We mentioned in the case studies that we went over earlier, such as discussions of Edward Snowden and Syed Farouk, how big a role legal questions and ethical questions play in this evolving threat landscape. So we get into those types of matters in that particular course. And we offer other courses as part of the core that include more in-depth analyses of the legal foundations of cybersecurity, as well as professional development, how to continue growing in this role over the course of your career through horizontal or lateral moves within organizations to promotions and so on. So again, the core courses really are designed to give the student a clear, firm foundation and what cyberspace and cybersecurity are all about. And from there, students progress into one of two specializations. So we can talk about those next if you like, or we can chat a bit more about the core courses. I toss it to you, Jesse.
Yeah, no, let's get into the specialization, then we can kind of talk about the professional development project at the end. I think it'd be a little easier to talk about that after we go through the specializations. So let's look at that. We've got two different specializations, cyber policy and cyber data fusion and analysis. Let's speak on that.
Sure. The cyber policy track really is geared toward folks who see themselves in a clear management / leadership type of role, whether now or in the future, in cybersecurity. So some of the courses that we offer under this specialization include law, public policy, and politics. These three things, law, public policy, and politics, interact constantly in government at every level, federal, state, and local. And so being able to sort through those interactions and what effect a change in politics, say, can have on law, or what effect a change in policy can have on politics, those are really valuable skills. So we hope students come away from that course with a much clearer understanding of how those three things interact in the broader context of cybersecurity. We also get into a discussion of law and ethics of cyber espionage. It's been said that espionage is the world's second oldest profession. I won't dwell on what the first might be. But ethical considerations and legal considerations are tightly bound up with discussions of espionage. Is it moral to steal secrets? Is it legal to steal secrets if it's for a morally justifiable reason? These are really difficult questions that people have grappled with for decades. And now, going into this course, it will be your turn to add your voice to this ongoing debate and to really sit with the tensions involved in law and ethics and espionage activity globally. We'll then get into cyber war and deterrence. There's such a fascinating debate happening right now, especially among research scientists, and I count myself in that group, around what cyber war actually is and whether it behaves in the same way as conventional physical warfare. So the deterrence piece of this course, I think, is especially interesting. During the Cold War, the U.S. and the Soviet Union built up these enormous arsenals of atomic weapons, and those arsenals, by and large, still exist today. But the question is, can a country build up offensive cyber capabilities and use those offensive cyber capabilities to deter other nations from even attempting to attack? That's an open question that's being discussed and debated intensely right now. And going right along with the war and deterrence course, we have international aspects of cyber policy, where we get into how organizations like the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, or the United Nations, the UN, deal with cybersecurity considerations on a global basis, and what that means for us in the United States, what that means for us as government employees or business employees for that matter. So broadly, the cyber policy courses, are geared toward folks who kind of see themselves more in the management and leadership role of organizations. And it's really a terrific collection of courses that we've assembled for that particular specialization. So the cyber data fusion and analysis specialization, by contrast, I would say is geared more toward folks who kind of see themselves in data-heavy analytical roles, who really like to gather and clean and wrestle with data to make sense of it. So some of the courses that students in this track, or this specialization rather, will experience include cyber ethics and professional responsibility. Getting back to the Edward Snowden case that we discussed earlier, Jesse, that particular case involves really difficult questions about what it means to gather data on phone calls, say, for 180 million people every day. Is
Right.
that morally right? Is it legally right? And so on. So those types of questions are what we're going to deal with in that particular class. Open source cyber surveillance is another great course that we have in this specialization. Right now, the U.S. intelligence community is mounting a massive effort to collect intelligence on bad guys, for lack of a better term, overseas through social media like Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. And so this course gets into how that is done, why that is done, how to make sense of that data, and how to distill it into a form that's useful for policymakers and decision makers. And it naturally flows, too, into cyber data fusion, the next course that I'll discuss under the specialization, which is all about assembling that data, sifting that data, and integrating it with other data sources that aren't your own. So if you're working for an agency like the NSA, for example, you might expect to pull in data from an agency like the FBI, like the CIA, like the DEA, and assemble all of that into one cohesive package that makes sense. That's a tough process that you can learn to engage in yourself. So that's what we convey in that particular course. The final course I'll talk about in that specialization is Advanced Topics in Cyber Data Fusion. This course, flexible topic is set by the individual instructor on a recurring basis, but it might deal with things like the following. Computer hardware maintenance and strategic planning. It might deal with things like personnel management and budgets. It might deal with things like legal and policy considerations in espionage. So it's a flexible kind of course, but instructors will put their own unique twist and spin on it. And I think that provides students potentially a really valuable opportunity to deepen and strengthen the learning that they've acquired thus far in the program.
Yeah, that is excellent that we have that flexibility built in, because as we know, this is constantly evolving and changing, and to be able to adapt to what you just heard in the news or a new study that just came out, right, is extremely important.
That's right. That's absolutely right.
Excellent. It's a great explanation. Hopefully this brings a little bit more clarity. I think we get that question a lot in admissions. What's the difference in the specializations, the different types of career opportunities? It sounds like the policy would be better for someone who's really kind of going to be more of the leader, or is a leader, and the fusion analysis for someone who wants to be kind of that data specialist, if you will, being able to kind of bridge the gap and provide the right type of data to the manager. Is that what you're saying? In kind of like a high level?
Yeah, at a high level, I would agree with that characterization. I mean, for the policy folks, again, they kind of see themselves, I would say, more in like a management or leadership role. But cyber data analysis folks are the sort of person who gets energized and enthusiastic about wrestling with data and making sense of it and developing patterns. So, each specialization makes its own unique contribution. My advice to any potential student considering our program would be to take a little time and ask yourself, where do I potentially see myself if I'm going into cyber policy? Do I really get excited by dealing with lots of data, or do I really get charged up by thinking about managing people and organizations? And there's no right answer. That's the sort of thing that each student has to sort of settle on for him or herself. But both specializations are really excellent, and it's a joy for us to teach them.
Fantastic. Well, Austin, our next slide, we've addressed a lot of this, I think, throughout our presentation, but I think it's good to just look at everything that we've kind of discussed in one slide as we get into learning online next. But some of the things that make our school unique and this program unique, if you want to address some of the topics here on the slide.
Certainly. The first thing I'd point to, of course, is our faculty, because they really set the tone and the culture for the academic program. And one thing that really sets us apart from other schools, I would say, is the fact that we have such depth of professional experience here as practitioners, as well as academic training. So in a lot of schools, you'll see folks who have come through a career path that's more or less purely academic, and that's fine. But what is different about us is all of my colleagues have worked in the field themselves. So we have people who are former prosecutors. We have people who are ex-military. We have people who've worked in law enforcement, people who've worked in investigations and intelligence, and sometimes all of these. I mean, in my own personal background, I've worked for multiple federal agencies, the Department of Defense and the Department of Homeland Security. I worked for a state intelligence agency, the Virginia Fusion Center. And I've also worked in policy on Capitol Hill. So I've kind of seen a little bit of all of government. And that, I think, really makes not only me stronger as a contributor to the program, but it's the same sort of thing that I'd say about all of my colleagues, too. All of us bring our own unique strengths to the program by virtue of our professional backgrounds outside the university environment. And so we take that learning and we take that experience and we pass that along to our students, and hopefully that makes the experience much richer and more meaningful for them. So beyond the faculty, I'd also point you to some of the unique centers and institutes that we have on campus. We talked earlier about the Northeast Cyber Forensics Center, so I won't address that again, but another entity that we have on campus that's pretty interesting is the Economic Crime and Cybersecurity Institute. This is led by its executive director, a good friend of mine named Ray Philo. And the Institute has developed extensive relationships with both government agencies and businesses that are eager to hire people who are coming out of our academic programs with excellent cybersecurity training and experience. So that kinds of relationships generated through that institute are invaluable for us as well as our students. But beyond that, too, it keeps us very much plugged into the practitioner world that's happening outside the boundaries of the college itself. It keeps us in close touch with where demand is in the marketplace. And I think for so many of our students who are thinking about a career switch or are thinking about trying to gain a promotion within their current organization, that kind of intelligence on market conditions is extremely important. Our curriculum itself and the courses we teach are constantly being updated because, as we've discussed repeatedly, Jesse, you know, again, this field is constantly evolving. You can't let it lie stale. And so just sharing from my own experience as an instructor, I update my courses literally every semester because things are changing so quickly. It's just something that we have to do, and we take pride in that because we know at the end of the day that we're never handing along information to students that is somehow out of date or no longer relevant. We're very much on top of current trends in government as well as in industry. And speaking of industry, I mean, we do have a very strong reputation. We've graduated many alumni who've gone on to very cool positions, whether in the business world or government or nonprofits or even in self-employment, business for themselves. I just yesterday was speaking with a class of mine about a former student who now works for the FBI at their Manhattan field office in cybersecurity. Wow. She's a technician there. And of course, you know, as a faculty, as an institution, we're extremely proud of the work that she does there for the FBI, and the fact that she's able to tell people about her experience at Utica College is extremely special for us as well. Our ties to different accrediting agencies such as the NSA, DHS, and the Defense Cybercrime Center, I think is a real mark of quality for us that sets us apart potentially from other schools. In addition, we talked earlier about the formal relationships we have with the EC Council as well as CompTIA. So I think that blend of government and private industry approval and engagement is very important for us. And the last thing that I'd talk about is very dear to me, and that's the types of relationships that we develop with our students. It's easy, I think, sometimes in a university environment to feel kind of lost in the shuffle, like you're just a number. But we really sincerely take pride in getting to know our students. We want to know you as a person. We want to know what your pets' names are. We want to know where you went on vacation. We want to know what your hopes and dreams are for your current profession, because knowing all those things not only helps us to work together better, but it keeps us very much in touch with your goals as the student. And again, at the end of this, we want you to succeed. We want you to fulfill your own objectives. And so getting to know you is such an important and valuable part in achieving that. So the small class sizes that we offer and that kind of close interaction with professors helps to ensure that you're forming professional relationships with our faculty. And those relationships don't stop once you graduate. We want to hear from you. We want to stay in touch. And I can't tell you, Jesse, how many times I've heard from alumni, whether via LinkedIn or email, or they've even come to visit campus just to say hi, and to tell us about all that they're doing and all that they've achieved and so on. And that's really the most rewarding part of this job for me personally. It's whenever I get a message like that via email or LinkedIn, or have a student come knock on my office door and say, you know, hey, I'm just visiting, or hi, to tell you about this group.
Ooh, Austin, we lost you for a second.
Yes, I'm here, Jesse. Can you hear me?
There you are. Yeah, it cut out a little bit for a second. You were saying, yeah, I think we heard just that a lot of people coming to visit just really show how close those relationships have been. Excellent.
Yeah, yeah.
Appreciate you sharing. No, I agree. That's definitely the biggest things that you see that set us apart, and those are things you can't put on a website. You know what I mean? It's hard to really talk about them unless you give examples like you have. So I appreciate you sharing that. It is important. Well, real quick, we just want to talk about the learning environment that we offer here, and we'll go into just a couple questions, and we'll be wrapping up. But a lot of you, may have never learned online before, and it can be a little bit scary. Kind of wonder, am I going to be all alone? Am I going to have any support? And I think Austin's already talked about the type of support, but let's look at just some of the things that we offer with our learning environment, which is also an important thing to consider when you look at a school. How long have they been teaching online? How aware are they at conveying the information in online learning environment? A lot of schools will put a program online and try to duplicate what they do in a classroom, and that just doesn't work. So we've already talked about the faculty. I think you've understood the quality of our academics. The high degree of personal attention, small classes. Usually with this program, it's 15 students or less in a class, so you really do get that interaction with the professor. The online environment we use is called Engage. It's very simple, very easy to use. You can access it from pretty much any type of device, and it reformats really easily so you can view it and be able to use it, let's say, on a smartphone or a tablet. If you're, let's say, commuting on the train, you can get some work done, or if you need to check a posting at work, in the middle of the day. It gives you that flexibility. Austin, can you talk a little bit about how you guys engage the students with a lot of the classes having like maybe a weekly webinar, if you will, or conference call?
Sure. Every instructor approaches this a little bit differently, but I can share with you from my own experience. In all of my classes, I post a weekly video lecture that I keep updated semester after semester, in which I'll talk about the week's reading assignments, try to synthesize them, make sense of them for students. And I've gotten great feedback because, you're actually seeing me. You're actually hearing my voice. And oftentimes learning can be a lonely road. And so we really take pains here to generate community among our classes. And doing video lectures is one way that I achieve that. We also usually have at least 2 weekly discussions going. These are asynchronous in nature, so I'll post something, you'll post something 3 hours later, and those just run in the background. They're typically centered around the week's assignments, whether those are readings that you are assigned, or videos that you have to watch, or audio files that you have to listen to. And so those are 2 really valuable ways that we keep students engaged over time. But beyond that, within the Engage online system, Engage with a capital E, there is a very robust messaging functionality that you can use that's essentially like an internal email system. So it's very easy for a student to reach out and get in touch with me, and it's similarly very easy for students to get in touch with other students if they have to. So there are a variety of ways that we keep people engaged. I can share with you too that some of my colleagues also do things like have weekly conference calls and webinars similar to what we're doing here, in which they have kind of a synchronous as opposed to asynchronous discussion where some material gets presented via PowerPoint, say, and it's discussed, and students have the opportunity to ask questions of the instructor live. So there are a range of ways that we keep students focused on their work and help to really build that sense of community in our classes.
Excellent. Excellent. And typically when we survey our students, the amount of work, a lot of people are, how am I going to integrate this into my busy lifestyle, right? And well, you cut out all the driving time to class, that helps a little bit, but then you got to look at, what are the actual hours I'm putting in, and when we do the surveys for graduate courses like this, it's going to vary, I think, depending on the student, right, Austin? But I know we hear, between that 12 to 18-hour range of time per week. Would you say that's pretty accurate to what you're seeing with most of the students?
Yeah, I would say that 12 to 18 is a good range. Again, it depends somewhat on the instructor and the particular class that a student is taking, but
Yeah, exactly.
we get it. I mean, we're working professionals too. We understand that the types of folks who come through our programs very often have full-time jobs. They might have mortgages. They might have families. They might be deployed on active duty in the military, and sometimes they have all of those things going at once. And yet, we really go the extra mile, I would say, to make it work for each and every student. Just, I can share with you one example, as a matter of fact. A few semesters ago, I had a student who was deployed in Afghanistan in one of my courses, and he emailed me at a very odd hour. It was like 2 a.m. or something because of the time difference, and he said, hey, Professor Givens, I just wanted to let you know I'm coming back to the United States. I'm going through Kuwait and then Germany. I have no idea what my timetable is. It could take a week, but because of this travel, I just wanted to let you know this particular assignment might be coming in late. Is that okay? And so I'm reading this the following morning, and I'm scratching my chin, and I'm thinking, you can take a year to complete this. You're coming back from a military deployment, my friend. We really want this to work for students, and so we will be as flexible as we need to be to make sure that this kind of works with you. And communication, of course, is key to all that. If you have particular needs, if you have particular demands on your schedule, we want to hear about those as instructors so that we can work with you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Austin. Well, let's take a couple questions, and we're going to wrap up here for our session. But this is some of the questions that I've had emailed, and I wanted to address. One of the big questions I get a lot, just being on the phones and speaking with the students, Austin, is, what are the requirements for admission? We can talk about that. It's, having a bachelor's degree or international equivalent, and a minimum of 3.0 GPA, and there's a little bit of flexibility with that 3.0 depending on your professional background. But the other question is, do I need a technical background to pursue this?
No, you don't need a technical background to pursue this. And in fact, ironically somewhat, many of my excellent students, my best students over the past 5 years have not had technical backgrounds, and yet they've excelled in the work. And I think what drives that really is a couple of things. One is just motivation. Generally, they're hungry for this, and they really throw themselves in head first. But also they bring a highly energetic and professional approach to their schoolwork that often is mirrored in their work lives. So I would say to any prospective student who might be a little bit hesitant about this because they're uneasy about not having a technical background, relax, don't worry about it. Many, many students before you have done this successfully. We will train you, we will educate you, we will make you comfortable and confident, but really it starts with you. Are you ready to take that step and apply for this program if you feel that it's right for you? But once you're in the door, so to speak, let us take it from there. We're here to educate you, we're here to make you better. And so, for any prospective student who's kind of in that position, I would just say relax, go for it.
Excellent. Thank you, Austin. The second most popular question, and I think we'll wrap up with this, and this may take a minute to answer, but how is Utica College going to help me in identifying an opportunity, or maybe even better clarify, what are some of the things or resources I should take advantage of within the school that will help and assist me in getting that next opportunity?
That's an excellent question, and it's one that I personally have heard a lot as well. So a couple of things. From the moment you start in our program, a prospective student should bear in mind that you are plugging into a huge network of existing students, faculty, and program alumni. So you're not just, so to speak, paying tuition for the courses and the degree. You're also paying access to the network. And that is a very powerful network. As I mentioned earlier, we've had students go on to careers with the FBI, the NSA, defense contractors, private businesses, banks. The list is extensive. And so once you're part of the Utica College family, that's when it gets really interesting, because that Utica College name really opens doors for you. The alumni that we have placed in government agencies and businesses and banks and other industries feel an instant kind of connection, and it's difficult for me to describe this, but it's a feeling and a sense that you're part of the Utica College family too. And so I would encourage any student just coming in the
Austin, we
professional.
lost you in there for a second. Can you re-encourage our students? We lost what you were going to say there. Go ahead.
Sure. So I was just saying, any student who's just coming in the door, I'd encourage him or her to, immediately take advantage of that network, plug into that network, and leverage it for the entire time that you're a student and beyond, because it will open doors for you. A second resource that we have available is the Utica College Career Services Office. This is physically located on campus, but any student can use it. And so if you go to Google right now, you could just type in UC Career Services, and it will be probably the first link that pops up. You can email these folks, you can call these folks, you can make a virtual appointment, you can talk about your resume and how to format it better. You can talk about internship opportunities, because they're made aware of those on a frequent basis. Use the Career Services Office as a resource, because it's yours. The third resource I would point students toward is our on-campus internship coordinator. And this particular person works within the School of Business and Justice Studies at Utica College, and that's the particular school at Utica College in which our program is housed. This person's entire job is to identify and place students in internships. So if you're the sort of person who is transitioning in a career, an internship even midway through your professional development cycle as a working professional is really valuable, because it can give you that sort of baseline of experience that you can then leverage in the future. So the network, broadly defined, the UC Career Services Office, and our internship coordinator are three amazing resources that each and every student in our program can take advantage of.
Excellent, Austin. Lastly, the project at the end of this specific program, what are some things that we do with that to maybe also get students connected to an organization as they do their research? What are some plans that we're going to have for this?
That's another excellent question. Research provides a great opening and opportunity for professional relationships to form. So if you're researching a topic for your ultimate capstone research project, that might require you to make phone calls to certain organizations, to maybe even physically go visit certain organizations that potentially could employ you in the future. So to make this more concrete, let's say you're really fascinated by open source intelligence collection, and you want to learn more about this as part of your capstone project. Well, that might mean that you end up contacting any number of law enforcement agencies or even intelligence agencies to ask about this. And you'd be quite surprised how eager people are to just talk about their professional lives. Now, of course, in a topic like that, there's security considerations, right? Not everybody's going to be able to tell you everything about how intelligence is collected and how it's analyzed. But the point is, the contact is an opening to form a professional relationship, and that can help propel you forward. So the research project, while it's a hurdle in a sense, is also an opportunity, and I would encourage any student looking at our curriculum to really view it as just that, an opportunity.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Austin. Got on the screen here some of the next steps. So if we've already had a conversation with you here at admissions and you're ready to move forward and get started in the summer, we have a summer term. It's a great time to start this program. It's a little bit smaller classes usually, so even better way to kind of get yourself going before you start in the fall classes, which usually are a little bit more busy. And then we put the tuition here as well. Estimated tuition for our program a little under $24,000. So really a reasonable investment for this type of unique education. If you have questions or you haven't spoke with us yet, there's the number on the screen. If you just kind of said, hey, I want more information on this, but I don't really want to talk yet. I want to know all the ins and outs, and you watch this webinar, then let's chat with you. We want to be able to answer your specific questions and learn more about you and what's important to you, what do you want to accomplish, and then that way we can make sure this is the right fit for you and help you through the process. So Austin, thank you so much for taking your time. Just excellent information that you provided. I hope this was going to be very helpful for any of you out there looking into our program. Additional questions. Austin, I know you have a Twitter feed that is quite interesting. I do follow it as well. I wanted to put that out there for anyone who wants to follow you on Twitter. What is your Twitter ID?
Sure, it's at Givens, which is G-I-V as in Victor, E-N as in November, S-A-D. So Givens A-D. Or if you just search on Twitter, Austin D. Givens, you should be able to find me pretty easily.
Perfect. All right, we'll make sure to put that out here. And hey, appreciate your time. I appreciate everyone else who's going to be viewing this, and hope this is helpful. And we'll bid you a good day.
Thanks, Jesse.
Thanks, Austin.